Every system built to forecast human behavior relies on patterns, repeated choices, predictable reactions, emotional loops. But when it was confronted with a Sigma male, everything broke down. His actions didn't follow rhythm or routine. His silence didn't mean retreat. His unpredictability wasn't chaos, it was strategy. The more the system tried to map him, the faster he slipped through its fingers, like a shadow refusing to stay still. What confused the machines wasn't randomness, it was intention.
A Sigma moves by instinct, not impulse. He shifts direction the moment the world believes it knows where he's going.
He disappears when they expect presence. He speaks when they waited for silence, and refuses engagement when they prepared for confrontation.
Nothing about him follows the predictable arc others rely on to feel in control.
He is the one variable that refuses to cooperate because he has no interest in being understood, predicted, or categorized. If this kind of psychology fascinates you, if you want to understand the minds that break every model and rewrite every rule, subscribe to Silent Wise. Comment untraceable to show you're part of the few who think differently. And tell me, what do you believe makes a Sigma impossible to foresee? He changes direction the moment people think they've figured him out.
He moves like a shifting current, quiet, deliberate, impossible to grasp twice.
Just when someone believes they finally understand his rhythm, he pivots with a subtlety that feels almost supernatural. His unpredictability isn't chaos, it's precision.
He refuses to let the world map him, categorize him, or reduce him to a pattern that can be interpreted.
Every expectation placed on him becomes a path he intentionally avoids, not out of rebellion, but because he refuses to live inside anyone else's imagination.
People watch him, try to decode him, try to guess what his next step will be.
And that's exactly when he changes direction, leaving their assumptions hanging in silence behind him. He learned long ago that the moment people believe they know you, they stop seeing you.
They start interacting with the version of you they've built in their minds.
That's the precise moment he sheds his skin and walks away from the narrative being written around him.
He reads subtle shifts, the tone someone uses when they think they've gained psychological ground, the confidence that rises when they assume they can predict his behavior.
And instead of resisting, he simply exits the mental framework entirely.
It's like watching a shadow detach from the wall. One second he's familiar, the next he's an entirely different shape.
His redirection is never dramatic.
It's quiet, controlled.
A course correction no one anticipates until they're left wondering how they lost track of him so quickly.
To him, staying predictable is a form of captivity. Being known too easily is a threat.
So he crafts his life as a sequence of intentional misdirections, shifts guided by instinct rather than expectation.
He drifts away from places the moment they begin to feel too comfortable.
He changes habits right when they begin to look consistent.
He evolves the moment someone thinks they can understand him.
His direction is never linear, never repetitive, never something that can be captured in a system or a mind.
He lives in motion, refusing to let anyone pin his identity to a single path.
By the time the world thinks it has him figured out, he has already become someone new.
He moves in silence, removing all the signals prediction systems rely on. His life unfolds in quiet steps, no announcements, no hints, no emotional breadcrumbs for anyone to follow.
He operates in a frequency most people never tune into.
While others reveal their intentions through reactions, habits, or emotional noise, he strips his path of anything traceable.
He doesn't broadcast his thoughts, he doesn't reveal his plans, and he doesn't leave behind predictable patterns that can be analyzed or mapped.
Silence becomes his camouflage, an elegant invisibility that keeps his direction known only to him.
People try to read him, but there's nothing on the surface to interpret.
No tells.
No signals.
No emotional leakage.
His absence of expression isn't emptiness, it's strategy.
As he moves through environments, he absorbs everything while revealing nothing.
He listens more than he speaks, watches more than he interacts, and reflects more than he reacts.
Every observer tries to decode him using the same tools that work on ordinary minds: body language, tone, habits, emotional shifts, but they find only stillness, a void where patterns should exist.
His neutrality disarms attempts to categorize him.
His quietness ruins attempts to anticipate him.
His emotional minimalism erases all the cues that prediction relies on. He doesn't fight being studied, he simply gives nothing to study. In silence, he becomes unreadable. And in unreadability, he becomes free. When he finally makes a move, it appears to come out of nowhere, yet it was carefully decided long before anyone sensed a change.
That's what makes him impossible to track. By the time someone thinks they've gathered enough information, the information is already outdated.
His silence isn't retreat, it's transformation happening beneath the surface, shielded from external interpretation.
He advances without noise, shifts without warning, evolves without witnesses.
The world cannot predict a man who communicates through absence, whose direction is shaped by internal clarity rather than external influence.
In silence, he disappears from every system that tries to read him and becomes someone no one can follow. He breaks patterns intentionally, never repeating behavior long enough to be tracked. He lives in motion, not repetition. While most people fall into cycles that make them predictable, he dismantles his patterns the moment they begin to form. If he feels himself becoming too routine, too readable, too familiar, he shifts, quietly, decisively, and without explanation. One day he answers immediately. The next, he disappears for hours. One season, he's deeply social. The next, he withdraws into solitude. Not out of chaos, but precision. He knows that the easiest way to trap a man is to map his habits, so he refuses to give the world anything consistent enough to define him. His unpredictability is not confusion, it's strategy. Observers, friends, and even people who study human behavior try to predict him, thinking they've identified his rhythm. But just when they're confident, when they think he always does this or he never does that, he breaks the pattern deliberately. He does it without emotion or rebellion. It's simply his nature to avoid being cornered. Pattern breaking keeps him free. It keeps him unbound to expectations, undetained by assumptions, untouched by manipulation. People who rely on predictability feel destabilized around him. They can't anticipate his reactions, can't prepare their approach, can't influence his direction. Every time they think they've figured him out, he becomes someone new.
This constant evolution creates a psychological distance that no one can fully cross. He isn't mysterious because he hides, he's mysterious because he changes. His identity isn't a fixed script, but a living blueprint, rewritten every time he grows, learns, or outgrows an environment.
Tracking him becomes like chasing smoke. The moment you think you've captured its shape, it's already changed form.
And that's the quiet brilliance behind his unpredictability. It isn't randomness, it's intentional fluidity. A man who refuses to repeat himself becomes impossible to control, impossible to label, and impossible to follow. He remains one step ahead because no one knows where he'll place his foot next.
Except him.
He decides based on intuition, not logic, making his choices impossible to calculate. His mind doesn't move in straight lines or neat equations. He operates from a deeper internal compass that logic alone can't explain. While others weigh pros and cons, build lists, analyze outcomes, he listens to something quieter and far more accurate, the feeling beneath the noise. His intuition processes subtleties people don't even notice, energy shifts, micro-behaviors, inconsistencies, unspoken intentions, and it filters all of this into a decision that appears sudden from the outside, but is rooted in razor-sharp perception. This makes him impossible to predict. You can't chart the trajectory of a man who navigates by instinct instead of formulas. You can't map the behavior of someone who moves according to internal truth instead of external logic. His choices seem irrational only to those who don't understand the depth of his sensing. He may walk away from a job, a relationship, or a room without explanation, not because he's impulsive, but because something within him recognized misalignment long before evidence appeared. His intuition catches what logic misses: shifts in tone, subtle power plays, tension beneath smiles, and futures not yet formed. He senses when something is dying, when something is beginning, and when something is no longer worth his presence. And once that internal signal fires, he doesn't hesitate. He doesn't negotiate with what feels wrong. He doesn't delay action waiting for proof. Intuition gives him precision without needing clarity from anyone else. It's why he changes direction moments before others even realize the road has turned.
To the outside world, his decisions look random, untethered, mysterious. But beneath the surface, every move is the result of thousands of quiet calculations happening instinctively: emotional currents, psychological dynamics, unspoken motivations, subtle shifts in energy.
You can predict a logical man.
You can manipulate a rational thinker.
But you cannot predict a man who moves by instinct sharpened through experience.
His intuition makes him unreadable, untouchable, and impossible to anticipate, because no one else can feel what he feels or see what he sees before he acts. He withholds emotional reactions, eliminating the data others depend on to anticipate him. When something happens that would make most people flinch, snap, frown, or reveal a hint of what they're thinking, he gives nothing.
No tension in the jaw.
No shift in the eyes.
No forced smile or defensive tone.
Just stillness, calm, unreadable, impenetrable. And in that silence, people lose their map. Humans rely on emotional microsignals to predict behavior: fear, irritation, surprise, excitement, but he removes all of it from the surface. Without emotional leakage, there is no pattern to study, no rhythm to track, no psychological foothold for anyone to use. His lack of visible reaction isn't numbness, it's strategy. He knows the moment he shows emotion, he gives the world something to analyze, to weaponize, to interpret. By staying emotionally opaque, he starves others of predictive data, forcing them into uncertainty. This emotional discretion is not about repression, it's about control. He feels everything, but expresses only what he chooses, when he chooses.
His inner world remains shielded, accessible only to himself.
That gives him an advantage most people never develop. While others reveal their hand before the game even begins, he watches everything without showing the slightest hint of what he plans to do next.
People project onto him, guess at his motives, create narratives to fill the void he leaves.
But none of their assumptions ever land close to the truth.
He is the quiet space in a room full of noise, the calm observer nobody can decode.
When conflict rises, he doesn't escalate. When tension builds, he doesn't crack. When someone tries to provoke him, his silence becomes an act of psychological inversion, reflecting their intentions back at them. Over time, this absence of emotional cues creates a myth around him: a man who cannot be read, cannot be rushed, cannot be manipulated. It's not that he's hiding, it's that he refuses to give people the shortcuts they rely on.
He becomes a blank slate others cannot write on, a presence that forces authenticity because facades fall flat against someone who reveals nothing.
And so he remains uncharted territory, quiet, steady, and untouchably unpredictable.
He shifts his environment before anyone notices the energy changing.
Long before most people sense tension, imbalance, or shifting intentions, he feels it like a subtle drop in atmospheric pressure.
His intuition picks up microscopic cues, tone changes, delayed responses, the way someone avoids eye contact, the slight heaviness in a room that wasn't there before.
While others are still acting as if everything is normal, he has already mapped the trajectory.
He doesn't wait for conflict, betrayal, or stagnation to make itself obvious.
He moves first, quietly repositioning himself, adjusting his path, changing his emotional proximity. By the time anyone realizes the environment has shifted, he's already 2 steps outside it, untouched and unbothered. His early movement isn't dramatic, it's a silent recalibration, a soft exit that leaves no echo.
He doesn't announce his withdrawal, and he doesn't seek validation for it.
Instead, he treats environments like living organisms. When the energy becomes contaminated, constricting, or misaligned with his internal rhythm, he simply stops feeding it.
He disengages in subtle ways, fewer conversations, shorter replies, diminished presence, a calm detachment that feels almost ghost-like. People assume he is busy or in his head, but the truth is far sharper. He's already relocating himself psychologically, preparing the distance before the environment has the chance to affect him negatively.
He refuses to stay in spaces that disrupt his clarity or slow his growth.
His self-preservation is proactive, not reactive.
And when the shift becomes visible to everyone else, he is long gone, emotionally first, then physically.
He doesn't wait for drama to confirm his instincts. He trusts the earliest signals. Those who once relied on his presence suddenly notice the emptiness he leaves behind. Conversations feel different. Dynamics lose balance. The atmosphere changes, but no one can pinpoint the moment it started. That's because he moved before the energy collapsed, predictive, precise, and invisible in his exit. He doesn't need closure or confrontation. He needs alignment. And when a space no longer offers that, he simply removes himself from it with a quiet mastery no one ever sees coming. He stays unreadable because his mindset evolves faster than observers can update their assumptions. People try to understand him based on who he was yesterday, never realizing he's already shifted into a different internal landscape. While most individuals move through life on predictable emotional loops, he sheds old perspectives the moment they stop serving him. His growth is continuous, silent, and self-directed, a private evolution that no one witnesses but everyone feels. By the time someone believes they finally get him, he's already miles ahead, thinking differently, perceiving differently, responding differently. This constant internal advancement makes him impossible to categorize. He refuses to stay still long enough to fit into anyone's narrative. His unreadability isn't a performance. It's the natural result of a mind that upgrades faster than people can recalibrate their perceptions. When others try to anticipate his reactions, they find themselves chasing shadows. He doesn't cling to past patterns or habitual responses. He adapts, adjusts, and refines himself with surgical precision, discarding outdated versions of himself like worn armor. That's why people misinterpret him so easily. They're interacting with echoes of who he used to be, not the man standing in front of them now. He listens differently, moves differently, even thinks differently depending on what he's learned since the last interaction. Observers expect consistency, but he offers evolution. They expect familiarity, but he offers mystery. They look for past behavior to predict future responses, and that's exactly why they fail. And the more he grows, the deeper the gap becomes. He doesn't correct their assumptions or explain the shifts within him.
He lets people stay confused if they rely on outdated versions of him.
His silence isn't resistance, it's liberation. By staying unreadable, he protects his autonomy, his peace, and his direction.
No one can manipulate what they cannot define.
No one can anticipate what they cannot track.
And no one can control a man who refuses to live inside the limits of another person's understanding.
When a man moves this quietly, this independently, the world is left guessing, and that's exactly how he prefers it. The moment people think they've mapped his mind, he slips into a new version of himself, leaving assumptions behind like footprints washed away by the tide. His unpredictability isn't chaos, it's mastery. And those who can't keep up are never meant to follow him into the next chapter of his evolution. If you felt this, if it echoed something you've lived or witnessed, make sure you subscribe to Silent Wise and tap the bell, because this channel isn't just content, it's a mirror into the psychology few dare to speak about. Drop the word unreadable in the comments so I know you're one of the rare ones who sees beneath the surface.